Mist coiled through the valley like drifting silk. Morning light fell faintly upon the thatched roofs of Qinghe village, where smoke from cooking fires rose in soft spirals. Beyond the rice terraces stood a lone ancient tree, tall, gnarled, and silent, its roots sinking deep into the mountain's heart. For as long as he could remember, Elon had come to this tree at dawn. He carried an old broom, sweeping fallen petals from the shrine at its base. The villagers said this tree was a remnant of a forgotten era, a guardian of their lands. Elon never understood what that meant, but when he stood beneath its shade, the world always seemed quieter, as if listening. That morning, though, something was different. As his broom brushed away the last of the petals, a faint glow flickered between the roots. Not sunlight, not fire, something deeper, a pulse, like a heartbeat. Elon crouched down, brushing away the damp soil. Beneath it lay a shard of crystal, faintly warm to the touch, glowing with a crimson hue that shifted like embers. The moment his fingers touched it, his mind went silent, and a voice, distant and whispering, echoed through the air. "You have found me." He stumbled back, the crystal slipping from his hand. The glow dimmed, but the whisper lingered in his chest, soft yet ancient. "Who's there?" he called out. Only the rustle of the tree answered. A wind rose suddenly, sweeping through the branches. Leaves scattered like falling stars, circling him in a spiral of green light. For a heartbeat, he saw visions, a burning mountain, a broken sky, and countless voices crying out beneath a shattered moon. Then it was gone. He stood alone again, the shard half buried in dirt, glowing faintly as if waiting. From the path behind him came the voice of old Liu, the village elder. "Elon, still dreaming under that tree. Come, the river's flooding again. We need your hands." Elon blinked, pocketed the shard, and ran down the hill. He didn't notice the faint ember of light that followed his steps, nor the soft whisper that came again, barely audible in the wind. The veil begins to thin. That night, as rain fell upon Qinghe village, the shard under Elon's pillow pulsed again. And in the far-off mountains of Azure Peak, an old master opened his eyes, sensing a disturbance rippling through the flow of Linqi. The heavens had stirred. Chapter 2. The Storm at Azure Peak. Far from the quiet hills of Qinghe village, the mighty Azure Peak towered high above the world. Its snow-capped summit was said to touch the very sky, where the Kangyan sect, the most prestigious of all cultivation sects, had stood for centuries, a bastion of knowledge, discipline, and martial prowess. Within the sect's grand halls, long rows of ancient scrolls, mystic tomes, and relics filled the chambers, their contents passed down through generations. It was here that Master Qing Xuan, the sect's leader, sat in quiet contemplation. His robes, like the morning sky, shimmered with the faint light of distant stars. But tonight, something was different. His meditation was interrupted by a sharp, unsettling sensation. A tremor of Ling Qi, subtle yet undeniable, shuddered through the air, twisting with unease. King Xuan opened his eyes, his expression calm but stern. His hands, previously resting in a tranquil position, now clenched as he stood, the ancient wood of his staff tapping rhythmically on the floor. "The heart has stirred," he murmured to himself, the words barely a whisper. The heart of the veil, an artifact of legend, a source of unimaginable power. It had not been seen in over 1,000 years. Once a united force of destiny and chaos, it had been shattered in a forgotten war, its pieces scattered across the realms. But now, one of its fragments was awakening. Outside, the winds began to shift. On the mountain's edge, Yu Ling, a silent disciple of the Silent Valley, stood at the precipice, watching the storm clouds gather. Her eyes were sharp, piercing through the swirling winds. She had felt the shift as well. The same disturbance that had reached Master Qingxuan had also echoed through her senses. "It's beginning," she whispered to the howling wind. Yu Ling had always been connected to the spirits, to the threads that wove through the fabric of the world. She had seen visions, uncertain, fragmented glimpses of the future. But tonight, the storm brought something different, something tangible. Her fingers brushed the handle of her sword, Black Lotus, her constant companion in her travels between realms. Back in Qinghe village, the rain fell heavier, its rhythmic drumming on rooftops a soft, persistent sound. Elon sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the glowing shard in his palm. It pulsed with a faint warmth, like a heart that beat in time with his own. It was no ordinary stone. The moment it had touched his skin, it had filled him with a sense of both dread and wonder, a sensation that made him feel as if the very foundations of the world were trembling beneath his feet. He had tried to ignore it, telling himself it was just his imagination running wild, but now he could not deny it. The shard was alive. A sudden knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Elon!" Old Lu's voice broke through the silence. "There's word of a storm on the mountain. The river may flood. Come quick!" Elon hastily slipped the shard into his robe and rushed outside. The village was bathed in the soft glow of lanterns, but the air felt thick, heavy, as though the very atmosphere was bracing for something. As he hurried toward the village square, a strange feeling crept up his spine. The storm was not just a natural disaster. There was something ancient about it. Back at Azure Peak, Qingxuan's steps were quick, purposeful, as he made his way to the Hall of Records. The disturbance had set his mind in motion, and his first thought was to consult the ancient scrolls that had chronicled the legend of the Heart of the Veil. He unrolled one of the scrolls, his fingers tracing the delicate ink of the ancient calligraphy. His eyes scanned the pages with a practiced precision, until he came to the passage that had always haunted him, the one that spoke of the heart's disintegration and its potential to reshape the world. "The heart in fragments will awaken when the time is right, and in that time the veil will be lifted, revealing the truth of the cosmos." Qingxuan's fingers trembled slightly. He had always believed the heart's power was just a legend, but now he was unsure. The winds were shifting, the storm was rising, and the veil was indeed beginning to thin. At that moment, deep within the silent valley, Yu Ling felt it again, the pulse, stronger now, a call, distant but unmistakable. She turned toward the peaks of azure, her eyes narrowing with purpose. The path she had walked had been one of neutrality, of balance, but she knew this was different. The balance of the world was at stake. She could not remain an observer. The time to act had come. Chapter 3. Fragments of Fate. The storm raged with a ferocity that seemed unnatural, as if the heavens themselves were waging war against the earth. Elon stood at the edge of the village, staring up at the swirling clouds that had gathered over the distant mountains. The wind howled, carrying with it an eerie sense of foreboding. Behind him, the village square was in chaos. People hurried to secure their homes, gathering their families and supplies in haste. The river, once calm, had risen dangerously high, its waters swollen by the relentless downpour. The air was thick with tension. A storm of such magnitude was rare, but this one felt different. "Elon!" a voice called out from behind him, cutting through the roar of the wind. Old Lu, the village elder, appeared, breathless. "We need to get to higher ground, now." Without a word, Elon turned and followed the elder, his heart still heavy with the mysterious pull of the glowing shard in his pocket. It was as if the stone was calling to him, urging him towards something far beyond the village, beyond the storm. Meanwhile, far from the village, atop the azure peak, Master Qing Xuan stood alone in the howling wind, his robes rippling around him like the sails of a ship in a storm. His expression was focused, his eyes scanning the sky as if searching for an answer. The winds were no longer natural. They were charged with energy, raw and untamed, and they were headed straight for the peak. Elon, Qing Xuan muttered under his breath, sensing the thread that now tied the boy to the ancient artifact. The moment the shard had been touched by Elon, it had awakened something within the cosmos. The veil between the mortal world and the spirit realm was thinning, and the consequences of that were far-reaching. If the heart of the veil, or one of its fragments, was truly awakening, then the balance between order and chaos would be disrupted. That balance had been maintained for thousands of years, ever since the Great War between the realms. But now, the heart's fragment was moving, pulsing with an energy that would soon begin to influence the world. The storm was only the beginning. With a determined step, Qing Xuan moved toward the temple's inner sanctum, where the ancient scrolls resided. He had to find the information he needed, or the consequences could be catastrophic. Back in Qinghe village, Elon and old Lu reached the outskirts, where a group of villagers were already gathered. Some were preparing makeshift rafts, others were hauling waterlogged crates to higher ground. The river had begun to break its banks, flooding the nearby fields and threatening the homes closer to the water's edge. "Elon, you've got to help," Lu called out, his voice strained. "This isn't just a flood, it's unnatural." Elon nodded, his instincts kicking in. He waded into the knee-deep water, lending his strength to the villagers as they worked to secure their homes. But his mind was elsewhere, pulled by an invisible force toward the distant mountains. Something inside him, something ancient, was awakening, calling out to him. The shard in his pocket pulsed again, and he felt his heart quicken. He couldn't explain it, but there was a pull, as if the stone was telling him to go, to seek out its origins, to uncover the truth hidden within the storm. "Elon, wait!" old Lu shouted, but Elon was already moving. With a final glance back toward the village, he turned and ran, heading toward the mountains. The rain lashed at his face, the wind howling in his ears, but he didn't slow down. The shard was more than just a stone. It was the key to something much greater, something that would change the world forever. In the distance, standing on the edge of Azure Peak, Ye Ling felt the change before anyone else could. The storm had reached its peak, but now something deeper was unfolding. The spiritual realm was stirring, and with it, the ancient forces of chaos. Her hand rested on the hilt of her sword, Black Lotus, as she closed her eyes and let the winds carry her thoughts. The fragments of the heart were being drawn together, the veil was thinning, and the balance that had held for millennia was beginning to crumble. "Elon," she whispered once more, her voice lost to the storm. She didn't know why, but she knew one thing for certain: she had to find him. Back in the quiet depths of the silent valley, the elder of the valley, a master of the unseen paths, sat in a chamber of stone. His thoughts were a medley of visions, fragmented and fleeting. The heart of the veil had been scattered, yes, but not all of its fragments had been found. There were still pieces waiting to be claimed, and each fragment carried with it a different fate. With a deep breath, the elder stood, his ancient frame seeming to blend with the shadows around him. His mind was made up. The time had come to intervene. As Elon climbed the rugged path toward Azure Peak, the storm intensified. the winds howling as if trying to turn him back. But with every step, the shard in his pocket grew warmer, its glow faint but undeniable. It was guiding him, leading him toward the unknown. Ahead, the mountain loomed, its peaks hidden beneath the swirling clouds. But Elon knew that the answers he sought, the truth of the shard, the heart of the veil, lay ahead. All he had to do was reach the peak. Chapter 4: The Gathering Storm. The rain fell harder now, a constant deluge that blurred the world into a haze of water and shadow. Elon's steps were steady but hurried, his body soaked to the bone. He had crossed the river's flooded banks and was now climbing the treacherous path that led to Azure Peak. The weight of the storm seemed to follow him, its fury echoing his inner turmoil. The shard in his pocket pulsed again, its heat growing stronger with each step. It was as if it was alive, feeding off the storm itself. Elon could almost feel it, its pull growing stronger, tugging him closer to the peak. But what awaited him at the summit? What was he really searching for? "Am I ready?" Elon muttered to himself, wiping rain from his face. A distant rumble of thunder shook the earth beneath his feet. The winds were howling, but they didn't deter him. There was no turning back now. The storm had begun, and so had his journey. Meanwhile, far above him, on the highest balcony of Azure Peak, Master King Swan stood at the temple's edge, watching the storm swirl around the mountaintop like an ethereal beast. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the shifting winds. The air was thick with energy, both of the storm and something far older, far more dangerous. In his hand, he held a delicate scroll, an ancient map of the realms, detailing the movements of spiritual energy, the paths of the heart's fragments, and the balance of the universe. His fingers traced the lines of the scroll, and his thoughts darkened. Yu Ling's presence had been felt on the mountain. He knew that she too had sensed the shift. The forces that had kept the world in balance for centuries were now in motion, and the heart of the veil, fragmented though it was drawing people to it. He had hoped it wouldn't come to this. He could feel the pressure building in the air, the tension between worlds. "Elon," King Swan whispered, his voice carried away by the storm, "you must be ready." The boy had unknowingly awakened something ancient within him. The fragment he had found was one of the last pieces of the heart, and its power was more than Elon could comprehend. But it was already too late. If he could not guide Elon, if he could not control the forces now in play, then the entire world could fall into chaos. Back in Qinghe village, the floodwaters continued to rise. Villagers scrambled to higher ground, their faces drawn with fear. The storm was not letting up, and yet the worst was yet to come. As the winds howled through the village, old Lu stood at the riverbank, watching the water surge higher and higher. "Elon," he murmured, as if speaking to the mountain itself, "you've gone toward Azure Peak, haven't you?" His mind was troubled. He had seen strange things in the boy, a quiet strength, a deep connection to something beyond the ordinary. But now, with the storm raging and the world seeming to unravel, he feared for Elon's safety. No one, not even the most skilled cultivators, dared to venture up the peak in such weather. On the other side of the mountain, in the silent valley, Yu Ling was already preparing. The winds had not been kind to her, but she had always been one to embrace the storms. They were a symbol of change, of the forces that shaped the world. Her journey had always been about balance, to study, to observe, to learn. But now, as the storm raged around her, she knew the time for observation was over. The path ahead was unclear, but she was resolute. "Elon," Yuling whispered again, her voice soft but unwavering. "I will find you." The air around her shimmered, and her sword, Black Lotus, pulsed with quiet energy. With a single motion, she took to the path leading up the mountain, her figure disappearing into the storm. As Elon reached the higher slopes of Azure Peak, the world seemed to close in on him. The winds whipped around him, tugging at his clothes, stinging his skin with rain. Yet, despite the storm's fury, he felt something else, something deep within his chest, calling to him. The shard in his pocket was nearly burning with heat now. The pull was almost overwhelming. "Just a little further," Elon muttered, his breath ragged. The mountain was steep and the path was treacherous, but he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when he was so close to understanding. The storm, like an angry beast, seemed to grow even more violent. The trees along the path bent under the force of the wind, their roots struggling to hold firm against the battering rains. But there, ahead of him, through the clouds and mist, a faint light appeared. It was soft at first, like a distant star, but it grew brighter as he drew nearer. Elon's heart raced as he stepped forward. The fragment, the shard, the power that had been calling him, it was all leading him to this moment. The light flickered once more, and with a sudden flash, it was gone. At the very summit of Azure Peak, a faint hum filled the air, vibrating through the stones beneath Elon's feet. A powerful force, like a pulse of energy, surged outward in all directions. It was here, the heart of the veil. Elon's hand trembled as he reached for the shard in his pocket. The light that had once been faint now flared with intensity, swirling around him in a vortex of energy. It felt as though the very fabric of reality was bending, warping around him. "Elon," a voice echoed in the storm, a whisper on the wind, a call from the past. Elon's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just the storm he had been hearing. It was the heart itself, awakening,